Words before we begin. Thank you. So welcome to this recording of the session and welcome to the session, everybody. Just want to repeat what's already been said before we started the recording, that we offer our really profound condolences to Adam Johnson and his family and everybody involved in both clubs and everybody who was there at the game on Saturday. We hope that this session is going to be helpful to you and offer you some comfort, some reassurance and some tools that you can use. I'll hand over to Lisa.
Thanks, Drew. So yeah, just in terms of the aims of the session, just really to understand how the mind and the body react when we witness traumatic events. And just to add that I mentioned sort of before we started recording, we have planned this with the aim that there won't be anything that will be triggering for people. So deliberately avoided using sort of logos and images and things like that. We're also going to spend some time considering helpful ways of taking care of ourselves and others at this time, and to know where you can find extra help should you need it. Okay, Drew, I shall hand over to you then.
Thank you. So hi everyone, and we're aware that you've probably had a really difficult week this week. There's a reason why you're here today, looking for some help with the experience that you've had. So you might have had lots of distress, lots of anxiety and lots of difficult experiences over the week. And you might have those now. You might have found it really difficult to come to this session, or during the session, you might find that you get a little distressed or anxious. We hope that we're going to keep that to a minimum, but that might happen. So we want to give you a tool right at the very beginning that you can use now and at any time during and after the session if you get strong feelings of anxiety or distress. So I'm going to invite you to just do some slow, deep, deliberate breathing. Now, let's begin by, and this will just take about 2 or 3 minutes. So I'm going to invite you, if you feel comfortable, wherever you are, closing your eyes or picking a spot on the wall or the carpet and just soft focusing. So you're kind of taking your attention inwards. I'm just going to close my eyes and pay attention to what I'm feeling and just starting to tune into the fact that you're breathing. Most of the time we're oblivious to it. Just noticing that your body's moving. You might be able to feel the air coming in and out of your nose or your mouth. You might be able to feel your chest and perhaps even your belly rising and falling. I'm going to invite you to place one hand on your chest and one hand on your belly. And just notice the movement that's happening underneath your hands. And just being a bit curious about which hand is moving the most. And when we're anxious, often our breathing becomes quicker and shallower and is up in the chest. And when we are more relaxed, the breathing often becomes deeper and goes down into the belly, and we feel more movement in the belly. But we can tell our body to calm down by deliberately changing our breathing to that deeper pattern. So I'm going to invite you now to start breathing in. If you don't have a cold, breathing in through your nose, through your mouth if you need to, but slowing down your breathing by breathing in just through your nose and taking a big, deep, slow breath in and filling your body until you feel that belly hand starting to rise. And when you're full, just pausing for a couple of seconds, maybe to a count of 2 or 3 or 4. And then slowly releasing through pursed lips, a bit like letting the air out of a balloon really, really slowly. And when you're empty, just pausing again for a second or 2, maybe 1, 2, 3, 4, and then breathing in, doing what's comfortable for you. There's no right way to do this, just slowing down and deepening your breathing. So just give you 2 or 3 more cycles of breath practice at that. Maybe noticing on the out breath how your body lets go a bit, relaxes, your shoulders might drop a little bit. Muscles might just let go and soften and relax a little bit on the out breath. And we'll stop there. And maybe you might have noticed a difference from the beginning to the end there. Maybe not today, but there's a tool that you can practice, and we're going to give you a recording of that you can listen to. That will be available from the end of the session. We give you a link to all the resources connected with this session. So feel free to use that anytime you need to. And thanks for the thumbs up. Hope that's helpful. So let's start with a question. What brought you to this session? So we know what happened on Saturday, which is the reason that we're now all here. But the real reason that we're here today looking for some support is something has happened this week. We've been experiencing things, and I know from social media and from people I've spoken to the way that this has affected people. But here's a chance to just share some of your experiences in the chat, just to let others know that we're not on our own, that actually there are some things that everybody might have experienced. So we're not looking for any kind of detailed graphic descriptions. What we're looking for is just a few words saying what kind of symptoms, what kind of experiences you've had this week. So we'll just give you a couple of minutes to put those into the chat. So flashbacks. Feeling angry one moment and sad the next and teary the next. Feeling guilty for feeling this way. A lot of anxiety and stress, struggling with sleep, flashbacks, feeling sick, mixed emotions, very sad. Helpless as a nurse, I couldn't do anything to help, very tearful. Poor concentration, feeling weak, finding it hard to stop thinking about it. Panicky and helpless. Thank you so much for sharing all this. And I'll just bring up some of these as speech bubbles on screen, which capture the same stuff. These are things that were said on social media this week. And another thing that was said on social media, it's okay not to be okay. People shouldn't suffer in silence. So glad that everybody's here today, and you can see that you're not on your own, that these are really common experiences, reactions to this terrible event. So thanks so much for sharing. Just going to invite you to stop the chat for a minute because it's pinging and it's going to stop me concentrating on the next slides, and we'll have another opportunity to share on the chat a little bit later on in the session, if that's okay. So to understand why we're all having these experiences, we need to ask another question. What happens in the mind and the body when we experience a traumatic event? And what happens is this: we get the fight or flight response, which is the body's natural response to any kind of danger. So we sense danger and our body is the first thing to respond. Our mind quickly registers as some kind of threat to us, and our body immediately goes into threat mode, pumped with adrenaline and cortisol, which bring a whole load of changes around the body. And the most common ones, everybody will know, when we get anxious, our breathing starts to get more rapid and shallower. Our heart starts pumping really hard and fast, increasing blood pressure and sending more blood around the body because we might need it to run away or fight off an aggressor. We get that reaction. There's loads of other things. We get an urge to go to the toilet, which is associated with losing weight. If we need to run away fast, if we evacuate what's in our bowel and our bladder, then we will be lighter. And you see that in animals. So there's a whole kind of set of symptoms that go on. But what I want to focus on in particular today is the fact that, first of all, this happens even when the danger's happening to someone else. So we will all have had this experience. The minute we realise the seriousness of what was happening, we'll all have had this anxiety response happening in the body to some degree. And there's probably two reasons why that might be the case. One is that if we see danger happening to someone else, our mind makes the assumption that, well, that could happen to us too any second now. And so our body's ready to fight off and run away from the danger. But there might also be another reason, and that's that we're a social animal and we really care for other people. We get an urge to step in and protect other people, even when we can't in some circumstances. But people do get driven by this fight or flight response, which also brings kind of an urge to do things, to step in and protect other people from harm, like rushing into burning buildings or jumping in the way of vehicles as we push someone else out of the way. So it's a very natural, built-in human response that we have. Now, let's focus in on this bit, which is the really important thing for what happens when we experience a really traumatic event. So the brain is kind of hijacked. So our thoughts start racing, and it's very difficult to think. I've not got my reading glasses on. I left them at home, so I can't read the words under there right now. It's too small. But our thoughts start to race, and I'm going to show you a diagram of the brain, which explains the process that happens for memories in trauma. So when we're in threat mode, the brain's fear center takes over. So that little bit in amber down there is called the amygdala, and it's the brain's fear center. It's a very primitive part of the brain, one of the first things to evolve in evolution, and it's what protects us from danger. It's the most important bit of the brain, because that's the most important for us, is to survive. And the blue bit is called the hippocampus, and that's like the brain's librarian. So when information comes in, the information gets filed away in different bits of the brain. We can remember things, we can recall things from years ago, and that's because the hippocampus very neatly arranges things in the brain with a kind of time and date stamp and a location stamp. So if we think about a particular place, we can withdraw a memory from the memory bank. But when we're in a traumatic situation, a high anxiety situation, suddenly the librarian can't work because the amygdala takes over, the fear center takes over. It's a bit like being in, say you're in the school library as a primary school pupil, and the fire alarm goes, and suddenly there's all these books all over the place. You can't put them away. You have to leave the building immediately. And that's basically what the brain is doing. It says nothing else is important. We don't need to do any other task other than respond to the danger and keep ourselves safe. So memories just get flung anywhere. And we end up with memories kind of like this. So I don't know if you have a towel cupboard at home that looks anything like the one on the left. That is very similar to mine. And it very rarely looks like the one on the right, except when my mother-in-law has been to visit and had time on her hands while I've been out at work. But that's what our memories might look like after the events that we've experienced this week. Everything gets kind of chucked in, and it's disorganized, and it's falling off the shelves almost. And maybe that's what's behind the experiences that we've had this week of flashbacks and intrusive thoughts and nightmares. It's like towels falling out of the meta cupboard. And that's the mind trying to sort itself out and get organized. The mind doesn't like having this disorganized state. And so things are coming out and we're trying to make sense of it. So you might have found yourself really struggling not to think about it. And that's our mind's way of trying to recover from this and make sense of what happened. It doesn't compute. This doesn't happen. This doesn't happen. And it has happened. How could it happen? And how can I keep myself safe in future? Because this feels like a danger to us to go and experience this that we've witnessed. So that's the process that's going on. So flashbacks and intrusive memories and nightmares can feel like the event's happening right now. And that's because there's not a proper time and date stamp. So our memory isn't the same as normal. It's not like, oh, that was last Tuesday, or that was last Wednesday, or last August. It comes out and it feels quite often as if it's happening again right now. It's got a very immediate quality to it, a trauma memory. So it can make us feel very anxious and distressed several times again, and our body stays on high alert. So it's like we get the same reaction in the body all over again. So a lot of us have probably had more stress this week than we've had for a long time, because the body's got this lingering effect from what happened and from what the mind is doing now over the course of the next few days. And it can feel really exhausting. It's I know I wasn't at the game, but when I read about it, I knew that we were probably going to have to do something, and I wanted to know about what had happened. So I did get online, and I did see stuff that gave me really difficult sleep and exactly this intrusive thoughts and waking up in the middle of the night. So I know what you've been experiencing this week, because I've had it too in some small form. I don't normally have these bags under my eyes, as I'm sure you don't. So it feels very uncomfortable. I really like that diagram because it just captures when we're kind of chronically stressed over and over again, that it affects lots of different parts of the body. And that's why, for example, I remember in the chat there, somebody mentioned feeling sick. So the digestive system is affected when we've got lots and lots of anxiety. And also we can have feelings, all kinds of different feelings associated with memories. But we're not broken. I did read several comments on social media this week where people were saying, just feel broken, and we feel like that. But I think a key message from today's session is that we're not broken. These are normal reactions to a traumatic experience. This is just how the mind and the body are meant to react. It's all about keeping us safe, including this process of the mind trying to make sense of what's happened. So there's nothing wrong with us. And there were comments in the chat there about feeling guilty and feeling weak. We don't need to feel guilty or weak about this reaction, because it's unavoidable. If you're a human being, this is what you'll experience when you witness events like that. And the really good news is that most people recover naturally in a few weeks. It's just a really natural process that will move from that high alert state and the messy mind to a more orderly mind and a calmer state. And this is another way of thinking about it, another image for it. So if you imagine a jar full of earth, this is a science project you do at school to kind of get the different layers. But if you imagine that jar of muck and water shaken up, and if you leave it standing for a few hours, it gradually settles, and that's what will happen. And the stuff that's kind of causing the distress isn't going to go away completely, because we won't forget what's happened. It's a very difficult thing to forget, but it will settle and become like the silt at the bottom, something that isn't our whole experience all the time. And that will happen really naturally over the next few weeks for most of us. So how can we take care of ourselves in the meantime? What can we do? So what we want is to aim for a self-care balance. So I want to suggest that there's 3 things that we need to have in balance. So first of all, and I'm going closer to the screen, I'm putting my reading glasses on, I've not got my screen glasses. So talking about our thoughts and feelings. So that's really, really important. That work of processing what's happened to us is important. What we want is not to keep things bottled up. I'll talk about that a bit more in a minute. But we also need soothing and calming activities, things that just bring everything down a bit and give us a rest from that challenge and difficulty of thinking about stuff. And we also need to try and continue with our usual activities and routines as best we can, because that's a really helpful thing too. So how might we respond to difficult thoughts and feelings? So when we get horrible memories and emotions bubbling up, the natural reaction is wanting to shove things back into the cupboard and try to hold the door closed. So I have got a door on my towel cupboard that looks like that one on the left. And when you brush past it, sometimes in the middle of the night, it just pops open. And if it's not been stacked, all the towels fall out. So we can get this urge to try and hold that door closed to stop that from happening. We want to just shut it out and not experience it. But actually, the most helpful thing we can do is to kind of help to sort the cupboard out and stack everything neatly where it belongs. So that means we can't have the door closed on it. We need to let it open sometimes to do that work. So sharing our thoughts and feelings helps us to sort out the cupboard. And it can be a really healing thing to share when we're sharing with people that are caring and understand. And especially we've got a lot of people around us who've been through the same experience, family members, mates, and we can get support from each other to work through this together better than any therapy, because you all know what you've been through and what you've experienced. And thanks, Amy. Yes, I really agree with you. From what I've seen on social media, the hockey community have been really supportive of each other. So what I want to say is that this is kind of hard work. When we do that talking about difficult things and let thoughts be around and process it, it's draining. So it's really important to do the soothing stuff. So I'm just going to turn back from this slide because I want to ask the question, what works for you as soothing, calming activities? Well, you can see a few suggestions there, but do you want to share on screen, on the chat, the things that you do? Just take a minute or two to think about what are your strategies for dealing with stress. So we all have stress in day-to-day life anyway, and we've probably all got some strategies. Some of us are better at this than other people. We find it hard to prioritize sometimes. So we're talking about trying to find things that we can deliberately do. Walking the dog, going for a walk. So some people find talking about it a soothing thing. That's great. Playing video games, playing netball, reading, yoga, having a bath, nice bath, reading, relaxing music, keeping busy, sitting by myself. So that's a really interesting thing, that we can all have very different things. So somebody might benefit from being by themselves. Somebody else might benefit from being with their mates as a soothing bit of downtime. I find that at times of real high stress, reading a book that I've read before lots of times. I love The Hobbit. I used to read that in childhood, and it's a very soothing book to go back to because it just transports me to a different place. So that's a go-to. We might have a favourite film. Some people like loud music, some people like very quiet music or silence. So find what works for you and deliberately plan a bit more than usual. Make it a part of your week. Allow yourself to do this. If we had a member of the family was sick, if one of your children's sick, we snuggle them up in a duvet, stick them on the sofa with something nice to watch on the TV. We allow people to do that when they're going through difficulty. Can we allow ourselves to do that and prioritize it and know that we need to do more of it at the moment than we otherwise would, as a deliberate strategy to just give us a bit of release and relief? Thanks for all the sharing there. So also in the soothing, calming activities area, we could do these relaxed breathing exercises. So we've done that at the beginning, and there's a recording of about 4 different versions of relaxed breathing that you can try, and we'll give you the link to that at the end. What we're also going to give you a link to is something on 5 senses grounding. So when we have difficult memories and thoughts, it's taken us out of the present moment. It's taken us to a different place. We're going back 5 days ago, 6 days ago, and we're not here and now. And if we want to get some relief from that from time to time, we can deliberately tune into the 5 senses to come back to here and now. So the exercise, and we won't do it in detail now, but I'll just talk you through. It's notice 5 things that you can see, and you can even name them out loud. Notice 4 things that you can touch and feel them and notice how they touch. Notice 3 things that you can hear. Notice 2 things that you can smell, even your clothes, for example. And lastly, notice 1 thing that you can taste. So that's a really, really helpful exercise. There's a recording of it that will talk you through that slowly to help you to learn how to do that. And it's a really, really helpful tool for trauma memories coming up, for distressing memories, just to bring you back to the here and now. So we're going to flash this slide up at the end for a longer period. So you'll want to have your phone or a pen handy to either scan the QR code or write down the web address. Don't need to do it right now. I'm going to move on, but just so that you're aware, and we'll talk more about what's in that Google Drive that we've set up for you a bit later in the session. So the next thing in the triangle of 3 is continuing with our usual activities and routines. So keeping to your usual activities can help. A lot of us might have had the urge to not do normal things this week because we feel rubbish. So you might have had time off work or school, or you might have cancelled things that you were planning to do because you just didn't feel like it. And that's okay for a time. And it might be helpful to kind of give us a breather and just let us process things a bit, give us more time for that processing work. But if we do too much withdrawing from the things that we normally do, then it gives us too much time to think. So if we try and keep to our routines as best we can, maybe a slightly less smaller routine than we normally have, but doing plenty of things, it just stops us having too much time to think. And it can speed up the feeling that life's getting back to normal rather than making us feel that everything's fallen apart, because it hasn't. And we can carry on from this. So, and now here's the really challenging thing to think about, going back to watch the ice hockey. So that's part of our usual activities. And I'm a Blade. I have a season ticket on the Cop, and I'll be watching us lose to Wolves tomorrow. I know how important going to the game is as part of our routine, not just to support the team, but because of all the social things that go around it, going for a drink before and after, being with family. And it would be a terrible thing for us to lose the ability to have all that in our lives because we don't want to go back to watch the hockey. And I completely understand why people would feel right now, I never want to go to another game. So it may seem really difficult, and there's no may about it. It will be really difficult, and it will make us feel anxious and distressed and bring back difficult memories the first time we go back to a game. But there's a picture there of a small child getting back on a bike after falling off. And what do we say when your child's learning to ride a bike? Get back on straight away. We don't make a big fuss about falling off and hurting a knee. We just say, okay, come on, straight back on and off you go. And that stops us from building up a fear that stops us from doing this ever again. So maybe we want to think about going back to a hockey game in the same way, because it is one of the best ways that can help us recover, because it will help us process the memory and move through it. And the good news is the anxiety, the distress will fade. And what you've got as a real gift, as a real strength, is this support. And I've just seen messages flashing up in the chat again about the support of the community. 8,000 people experience this thing at the same time. That's extraordinary. Most people are on their own with traumatic events. They might have had a car accident and there's them and maybe 2 other people have to come to terms with it. But there are 8,000 of you. And when you go back to the game, you will all be having the same experience of difficulty, of all those feelings and memories coming back, but you'll be there to help and support each other. So there won't be a right time for you, but the earlier you can go, and I said that wrong. There will be a right time for you. There's no right and wrong about this. For some people, going back to the very next game, you might not feel ready for, although that's a really good way to face up to the challenge and be with people who are all going through exactly the same thing at the same time. But if you need to work up to it, then that's what you need to do. If you've decided that you never want to go and watch hockey again, well, that's fine, but I would still recommend that you try and go back to a few games first, because it does something really important for our memories. It gives you a new memory that lays over the top of the old one that helps you not to be so distressed. And we might even be scared of going back to the arena. And us and our children who might have been with us will want to go to the arena for lots of things. So we don't want to get into a position where we're scared of going back to that building because it's associated with a memory, and going back and watching the hockey a few times, and then we can decide if we're going to watch long term. But that's a really good way to work through this if you feel that you're able to. And you might want to think about this in terms of a staircase, because right now, be interested to know maybe in the chat what people are thinking about this idea of going back to the game. It looks like the next game is the 12th of November. So let's just take a minute to see what people are saying in the chat. Absolutely want to try and go for the players. It will be awful for all, but collectively we can try and support each other together. My other team plays Saturday afternoon, so I'm anxious about going back, but even if it's hard, we'll be surrounded by my hockey family and we'll get through it together. Yeah, and thanks, Cheryl, for kind of mentioning the people who weren't present but were watching at home or through socials as well. Just as difficult an experience and just as challenging. I'm struggling with this, but if the guys can do this, I have to be there to support them. It's my first ice hockey match and I admire the tight-knit community. Yeah, lovely. Okay. I thought I wouldn't want to, but you've helped me to think maybe it will be the right thing to do. Well, if it doesn't feel the right thing to do for you, well, that's fine. Don't feel pressured to go. But from a therapy point of view, from a therapist point of view, when we work with people who've developed PTSD, which incidentally you don't have right now because it can only be diagnosed after about 4 weeks of having these experiences, and we don't diagnose it before then because most people get better naturally. But when we do work with people who have PTSD, that we need to help them to go back to the place where the traumatic event happened, which they might have been avoiding for years. So really, the sooner you do it, the better. And it's a really important part of processing this and moving on from it. So you might want to think about planning a kind of challenge hierarchy or staircase, moving up from little things to big things. So going to the game might be the big thing. How can you prepare yourself to get ready for going back to the game? That might be as simple as putting your team shirt on and wearing that. If just having that is a reminder, then getting used to that reminder again until you're no longer scared of it. If you wear it all day, the anxiety will fade. Looking at team logos, looking at videos. We had a comment last night for somebody who had gone ice skating on Monday with a daughter. The two of them who were at the game Saturday made themselves go ice skating on Monday and found it really, really helpful, because you get the sights and the sounds and the physical sensations of being in the ice rink. So that could be a really helpful thing. So have a good think about how you might prepare yourselves, and especially preparing children and encouraging them that it's safe to go back, that this thing is incredibly rare. It's not going to happen again. We've learned lessons, and messages are going out from the hockey leagues about equipment that's going to make sure that this doesn't happen again. And the sooner we can get back to the game, the better. So thanks for all the things that you're sharing there, and just remember that there's no right answer for you. You have to choose what's right for you. So just going back to that balance diagram. So we just want to remember that we want this balance between talking and soothing and usual activities. Getting a good balance between those is going to be really helpful. So the key messages are that the mind and the body are reacting really naturally to a traumatic event, and the effects can continue to affect us for some time, but usually it's a fairly short amount of time. And for most people, this is going to settle down in a few weeks at most. And there are some simple things that we can do to care for ourselves and process this experience naturally. So I hope that's been helpful to you, and I'm going to hand over to Lisa now.
Thanks, Drew. So yeah, I guess kind of thinking about what we've just been saying, in terms of talking therapy, wouldn't necessarily be recommended sort of so soon after experiencing a traumatic event. And as we've already said, everyone experiences things differently. And I think that's become quite telling from the messages in the chat as well, that we all have really different reactions to these sort of events. Some people may benefit from talking therapies if they're still experiencing symptoms within around about 4 to 6 weeks afterwards. And as we've seen already this morning, processing happens really naturally through day-to-day activities and all the things that we've discussed. As we said, that kind of 4 to 6 weeks comes from the recommended sort of NICE guidance for sort of talking therapies. So yeah, as we said, sort of talking therapy wouldn't necessarily be recommended sort of straight away. If though, however, you do feel that you need further support down the line, just going to tell you briefly a little bit about Talking Therapy services. So as we've said, we're from Sheffield Talking Therapies, and Talking Therapies are available sort of up and down the country. The link on the screen there at the bottom is just is a website that allows you to pop in your GP surgery and it will give you your local service. So you can just type into Google NHS Talking Therapies and it will bring that link up for you. So Talking Therapies services are free NHS services for adults over the age of 18. And we work with mild to moderate people experiencing mild to moderate mental health difficulties. So things like low mood, stress, anxiety, majority, if not all, services do accept self-referrals, which you can either do sort of through the services website or by giving them a call. We do take GP referrals, but it's often quicker and easier to self-refer to the services yourselves. So, as I said, we work with a range of common mental health difficulties, and that can include a range of anxiety disorders, things like obsessive compulsive disorder, panic attacks, anxiety specifically in social situations, PTSD that we've briefly mentioned already. Services usually have a variety of different treatment options, so this can include courses sort of done online, run maybe a little bit like this one if you like, one-to-one options that could be either over the telephone, virtual, sort of through video, or face-to-face. Services usually would invite you for an initial assessment just to establish whether the support, the therapy that service provides is right for you at that time. And I just want to mention that Talking Therapies services are not urgent or crisis services. So if anyone does have any concerns about their safety or have thoughts of harming themselves or is aware of other people that do, then we'd recommend sort of contacting urgent crisis services, of which there are NHS services in every area. So that's just a little bit about Talking Therapies services, and there is a lot more information about our service on our website, which will be on the screen at the end of the slides.
And Lisa, I've just
Yep.
noticed comments in the chat about people who had previous trauma and it's kind of been reactivated. So if you've had PTSD that's kind of reactivated by this experience, that might be a different case. And so we wouldn't necessarily recommend waiting. Feel free to refer yourself to one of the Talking Therapies services in your area, if that's the case. But if this is the first time you've experienced a traumatic event, then every likelihood is that you're going to recover from it, especially if you do, as you're all saying in the chat here. I know some people are going to find it more difficult than others and might wait a little while, but there's a lot of people on the chat saying that they're going to go back. So sorry, I'm interrupting now, Lisa.
No,
but
not a problem at all.
those themes seems to be really important on the chat.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. And we'll open the chat for some questions in a little bit. But before we do that, just wanted to just briefly mention some other sources of support. So some, if not all of you may have heard of the Samaritans helpline. So this is a listening service, so you don't have to be feeling kind of the worst you've ever felt to access it. It's simply there for anybody who wants to talk things over. They're open any time of the day or night. It's just a short 6-digit number that's on the screen there, 11611123, sorry. You've also got the Shout crisis text support, so you can text Shout to the number on the screen. Again, really simple and easy to use, and that's more of a kind of a crisis or urgent support service. For those of you that are within the Sheffield and Barnsley areas, there is the Hope South Yorkshire organisation who do run peer support groups for people who've experienced traumatic events. You can find more information on their website, but I believe they do work with children as well as adults, so that might be worth looking into. And finally, the Mind website I've just popped on the screen there. So they have loads of information about common mental health difficulties on their website. So that might be a useful resource to kind of look at over the coming weeks and months. And if I just hand back over to you, Drew, just to explain about the links on the screen.
Okay. Thank you. So now's your opportunity then to either write down that web address, and if you just type in that bit.ly/hockey-support, then that will take you to it, or scan the QR code, and you'll see what looks exactly like that on the left-hand side. If you've got an Android phone, you've probably got that installed already. If you've got an Apple phone, you probably want to install the Google Drive app. Once you've got that and open this up, it'll look like this, and it'll give you permanent access to a load of resources that are helpful. So there's audio resources, recordings of the exercises we've talked about, grounding and breathing exercises. There's fact sheets on trauma and self-care, including some things that we haven't talked about in this session that I know will be important to people, like sleep. There's a whole sheet with tips on how to get a good night's sleep, particularly if you're disturbed by difficult memories or emotions. And then there's a folder for children and parents. So there's two kind of adapted information sheets about trauma and about anxiety symptoms for children that would be helpful for you talking through things with them. And there's an advice sheet, 2 sides with a lot of information which has been put together this week by the Children and Young People Service, for whom we're really grateful. Lots of tips for parents on how to support children, and lots of links on there for other resources as well, including a BBC bite-size resource on trauma, experiencing traumatic events, and that's really, really helpful for kids. Lastly, there's a copy of the workshop slides. So you'll have copies of these slides. I've added a slide today, so I'll need to update them. So you might want to come back tomorrow for the updated version with the staircase in it, which wasn't in yesterday's presentation. But if you want to share those slides with people or use those slides, I don't know if I know there were guide groups, for example, who were there. Now, this is going to be available as a recording if you want to show that, or if you want to use the slides yourself and talk through things in an age-appropriate way with a particular group, then please feel free to do so. I know there was a dancers involved as well. So for groups like that, that might be really appropriate. So the slides are there and available for you to use as a PowerPoint presentation and as PDFs. And lastly, there's a video that explains how to create a shortcut to your home screen, so you've got these resources and don't lose the link. So it says watch me first. So if you watch that video first, it'll just talk you through using the Google Drive resource. So I hope that's going to be really helpful, so you don't feel like you're left with nothing to support you, but you've got plenty to be going on with over the next few weeks just to help you get through this.
Thanks, Drew. So yeah, just conscious of time, but we do have some time for some questions. We can see the Sheffield Talking Therapies website on the screen there. So if you do want any further information about the service, that is there. As we said before, if you keep any questions general rather than sort of specific to sort of individual difficulties, that would be great. Thanks. I can see Sarah's popped the website in the chat there. And yeah, feel free to ask any questions. We have got a feedback link that Drew has helpfully created. So again, I'll just pop that in the chat, and we'd be really grateful if you could just provide us some feedback on the session, and feel free to ask any questions if there are any. I appreciate it may not have been an easy session for people, but thank you for sticking with us.
Well, thanks for the comments, and do please, if there's any suggestions of ways we could improve what we've provided, then do let us know.
Glad to hear that you found it helpful. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, and you know, thank you to each one of you for being here, because you've supported each other just by being here and in sharing what you have through the chat. Everybody knows that we're not alone in this. It's a common experience, and it's something that we can get through with the support of each other. So thank you for that. And I think I might come to my first hockey game on the 12th of November. If anyone from the club's listening and wants to send us some tickets to the service, we'd be really grateful, because it would be really important to me, definitely, and I can see Lisa nodding as well, that it feels something that we would like to do, to be there with you when you get back to your first game.
Yeah, I might make the trip up from Nottingham.
Thank you for all those messages. Thanks. The big thanks is to you guys for your support of each other. Any questions at all? Could we have a drop-in service at the game if the club did invite you? Well, that's something we'll have a think about. What we could do at that first game. Yes, thank you. We'll think about it and potentially talk to the club about what could be done. I think the biggest resource you have is each other on that day. But we'll think about. We might have a stall that offers leaflets about the service, for example, and maybe the QR code to the resources and the recording of this session.
I can see we've got a question in the chat, wondering about children going to the arena before an event.
Yes, and that I think is a really important suggestion, that you might go. So I saw someone in the chat earlier on talk about going to the memorial the session at Nottingham on Saturday and going to the arena there. That might be an opportunity to go when there's not a game on, but to go back to that kind of environment and also process what's happened in the memorial to Adam. So trying to get to that memorial might be one way forwards, a stepping stone. Or going and visiting. I did read somebody had been back to the arena to look at the flowers that had been laid outside our own arena. So that might be a way for kids to break the ice and start to overcome the fear of just being in that place. Yes, the 12th is Remembrance Sunday too. It will be very emotional. Well, thanks everybody. So we'll bring the session to an end there if there's no more questions. Just check in with Lisa and with Sarah that we've not missed any questions that have disappeared off of the chat. Okay.
No,
well, thanks for joining us, and look out on social media for a link to the recording of this session if you want to watch again, or you want to share it or signpost people to it who might benefit from it. We'll be putting that out on social media shortly. Okay then. So thank you, and have a good rest of the day, and take care of yourselves over the days ahead. And hopefully we'll see you at the arena.
Thanks everyone.